So I'm just about to start the recording. Just in the chat, can anyone else hear me okay? Yeah, Maria's saying she can hear me. Aline, it might be that your microphone's turned down, or you may have, if you're in a Chrome browser, you could have muted the tab. So let's get started. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this session. As I said earlier on, I'll do this recap one final time. This session is G Suite for Remote Learning. So welcome to the G Suite for Remote Learning session. I will just one final time. Oh, somebody else is joining. I will one final time just remind everyone it's G Suite for Remote Learning, and I'll pop the links in the chat to the other two sessions that are going on at the same time. So if you wanted to be in any of the other sessions, the links are in the chat. This is a recorded session, so afterwards you can watch all three sessions back on the YouTube channel, and we'll share the links after today. So in this session, we're going to dig into Google's tool, G Suite, and how it's used for remote learning. So how teachers can use this when students aren't necessarily face-to-face in the classroom. So hi everyone and welcome. My name's Andy. I'm a Google Certified Innovator and Certified Trainer, and I work with the team at Google on the Google Certified Innovator program. But I was a teacher. I was a geography teacher, and I taught geography for 15 years in secondary school in England, and now I travel around the world and I work with Google training teachers. So that's my background. As we go through today, feel free on the right-hand side in Google Meet, there's the chat area. Feel free to, firstly, at the start here, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat so I know who's in the session. And also feel free to, as we go through, if you've got any questions at all, to ask questions about anything I'm covering in the chat. I'm more than happy to answer any questions as we go through this session. So let's get started. In this session, we're going to focus on Google's tools and how Google's tools can be used in the classroom by teachers. And on this slide here, I've got some of the logos of some of the Google tools that we often see used in schools. And so what I thought we'd start by doing, I've deliberately not put the names on, is seeing, have a look at those logos on my screen. How many of those do you think you could identify? So how many of those logos, and a couple of my logos I just recognize need updating because they've changed, but how many of my logos or the Google logos could you identify? Pop a number in the chat for how many of those you think you know, if you clicked it on the internet, what tools those would go to. I'm really interested to see how many of those tools people know. So Aline's gone with 5, Maria's gone with 9. Highest so far is 9. How many of those icons do you think, if you saw it on the computer or if you're on your phone and you saw that icon and you clicked it, do you think you know what that would go to in terms of those tools that are all part of Google and G Suite for Education? So we've had a 5 and a 9. Let's start to talk about them. So those are all these tools are tools that make up G Suite and Google for Education, and they are the tools that we allow schools to use. So just going through them on my screen here, you should be able to see my big green pointy mouse just to talk about what they are to start with. So we have Google Docs and Sheets and Slides, and those are very similar to Word, PowerPoint, and Excel that we would see in the Windows formats. And so those are creative tools for making content. And then we have Google Drive, and Google Drive is a storage area. So that's Google Drive, and that's an area for storing files and folders. And then what we're going to spend a bit of time on today is Google Classroom. So we're going to talk about that a little bit within the session. Google Classroom is our tool for when students want to communicate with teachers and vice versa. Google Earth, which is my favorite of the Google tools. As a former geography teacher, I'm a big fan of Google Earth. That's that one. And then at the end of the top row, Google Jamboard, which is our tool for white space and big thinking. Onto the second line, we've got Google Forms and then Google Sites. So Forms and Sites, Google Drawings, this one is. And then this one's fairly easy. I imagine this was one of the 5 that people got, was YouTube, because it says YouTube on it. Google Search, the search engine at google.com. Google Photos and Google Maps. That's the second line. And down the bottom line, got Google Calendar. And the one we're using right now, Google Meet, Google Chat, Gmail. I need to put the new logo in for Gmail because the colors have changed. Google Groups. And then we've got Google My Maps, which allows us to layer data on maps, and Google Keep. So those are some of the tools, and there are a big range of tools within Google's environment. And we're going to dig into some of them today. Not going to cover all of them, but we're going to dig into some of these tools as we go through the session today. As we go through, if you've got any questions at all, feel free to pop in the chat any questions you want to ask about any of the tools or anything related to using these tools with students. So let's get started. I'm going to start off with Google Classroom. So I'm actually going to come off this now, and we're going to go into the first of the tools, and I'm going to load up Google Classroom. So this is Google Classroom, and Google Classroom is a tool for teacher and student communication that we use when we're working with students and teachers obviously in the classroom. It's available to all users on all account types, so people can use this on our education accounts, but they can also use it over on Gmail accounts. And it'd be interesting to see, actually, in the chat, yes or no, is anyone who's in here already using Google Classroom? It's always useful for me to know at the start, how confident do we feel with Google Classroom? Any Google Classroom users? So just by putting Y or N in the chat, it would be great to find out if we've got any Google Classroom users in. So we've got some no's, which means some people are new to Classroom. No so far. We're one yes. I've got one user so far in. So thank you for the yes and the no. So we're going to just spend a little bit of time just looking at Google Classroom to start with, and then as we go through this session, we're going to look at some of the other Google tools as well. So this is Google Classroom. I'm already in some classes here. We can see I'm in like a maths class and the year 6 class. But let's imagine you came in for the very first time. So you're on the computer, you go to classroom.google.com on the address bar, and you come for the very first time into Google Classroom. You'd obviously have no classes yet, so you go to the big plus button and you press create class. So we're going to create a class now, and we'll call this class, we'll do a maths class today. Maths. And the only thing I have to do is put a class name in. All the other stuff is optional, but I can put things if I want to. If I'm in school and maybe the students need to know the subject of the room, I can put that in. But for now, we'll just put maths and press create. And when we do this, Google creates this space, this classroom space, for us to use with students when we are working with students, either face-to-face in the building, but more likely in the current situation, when students are away from school and you're at home potentially as well, and you want to communicate with your students. So here is my maths classroom. Google has finished. And when we load up Classroom, it lands on this page, and this is called the stream page. And the stream page is just a space, and very much like a sort of social media space, like a Facebook wall or on Twitter, where we can leave messages to each other if we want to. So I can, as a teacher, go into my maths class here and say hello to all my students, and press post, and then that puts that post of me saying hello onto my Google Classroom stream. Now, at the moment, my students can respond. They can come into this page once they've got access, and they can respond to my post. If I don't want students to be able to communicate on this page, up in the settings, I can turn this off. So over here in settings, I can choose. At the moment, it says students can post and comment. But if I want to, I could make it so that students can only comment, or maybe only teachers. So you can choose, depending on the students you're working with, and you know your classes. Do you want students to be able to, type in there, leave messages, or do you want to keep that as a space that you just put content in? So you choose how much interaction you want to have on that page. So that's our stream page, and that's just me posting a message there. But so often when we're using Classroom, what we really, really want to do is not just post a message, but talk to our students about some work we want them to do. So for that, we'd go over to the Classwork area. And as a teacher, we have a Classwork area, and we press create. So imagine I'm a teacher, I want to create something. I most likely want to create, in this case, we'll start with assignment. So we go to create an assignment. And this means this is more than just a message for our students. This is like we're saying to our class, we would like you to do something. We've got a piece of work, an activity, something we'd like you to do. And so when this page comes up, lots of options appear, but the only thing that we have to put in is the title. So the very minimum we have to put in is a title, and we're going to ask our class to let's ask our class to write a poem. So we're going to imagine we're asking I'm not sure why I'm asking that in a maths class, but never mind. Write a poem about maths. So we're going to put our work in there that we want our students to do in our class. And the minimum amount of things we have to put in is a title. Everything else is optional. So the instructions, we can put them in if you want to, if it's useful to our students. Open the document and add your poem. So we can put further instructions in if we think that will help our students, but that's your choice. Again, you know your class and your students. So we've got some title, we've got some instructions. Next thing we want to do is we're going to add something in. So we've got an add button or we've got a create button. Add means maybe we've already got something we want to share with our class. Maybe I've got an example poem already that I'd like my class to look at. And create means we've got to make something new. So what I'll do this time, because we haven't got an example, is we'll go create and we'll press docs. And what that does is it just creates a blank Google document. Here it is, my blank Google document that's sitting with my piece of work in my classroom. So I've now got this blank document ready for my students to use. Over on the right hand side here, it says students can view file. So that means that all my students could just look at what is at the moment a blank document. Maybe I'm going to show them an example poem. They could just look at it. So view, as the name suggests, means view. The next option on that list is students can edit the file. So that would put all the students in my class on one single document. So if we were going to create something together, we're going to work together on a document, we might do that. We might use that one. But third choice down, make a copy for each student. And I would say for people who are using Google Classroom, the most popular option is to create an assignment, give it a title like I did, and then make a copy for each student. And what this is going to do is it's going to duplicate my my document. In this case, it's a blank document, but it could be a worksheet or whatever I've got there. And it's going to make one version of that for each of the students in my class. So when they come into Google Classroom, they're all working on their own version of the work. So it's effectively like going and photocopying or printing off a worksheet and then giving that to your students. So we've got that. We're going to leave it on make a copy for each student. That's great. Remember, all these bits are optional. On the right-hand side, we've got some other choices. So it says for maths and for all students. At the moment, this is going to go to my maths class and to everybody in the class. But maybe I want to send it to more than one class. Maybe I've got two classes that are doing the same work. So at the same time, I could pick off more classes here and assign it to more than one class at once. And then over on the all students area, I've got all students at the moment, but I could choose individual students. If I had some students that need more support with this work, maybe I've got some students that need a slightly different worksheet, or maybe they need more help. So I've got a better version or a different version of the assignment for them. I can differentiate by just selecting individual students at this point and then setting different work for the other students. So I could do that. Points. This is sort of saying, do I want to mark this work? How do I want to score it? Again, you don't have to use Google Classroom's gradebook, but if you choose to, I could say, well, okay, this is going to be marked out of 100. Due date, when do I want the work handed back in? So I'm going to say to you, if we use this feature, we can help our students get more organized by saying, this is when I want you to hand this work back to me. So I'm going to say this is work due, let's have it Friday, the 11th of December. And for example, I put a time in as well, 11:59 p.m. You don't have to put due dates, but when you do put due dates, what it does is it goes and puts that in Google Calendar for the students to say, you know, you've got your poem that's due in on Friday and it'll be there in their calendar. So if you do use due dates, it helps students get organized. Below that, there's the topic area. So if I've got a lot of work in my Google Classroom, I can use topics to help students organize themselves better. And certainly if you've got a lot of things in Classroom, it can get very busy and students get confused about where things are. So you might want to use topics. And then down below that, I'm not going to spend much time today talking about these two because they're more advanced features, but we've got rubrics and we've got the plagiarism checker. So rubrics allows us to mark on a rubric or a mark scheme. And if you've got one you want to use, you can upload it there. And then the plagiarism checker allows us to check work that's coming into Google Classroom against the internet. So how do I know that one of my students doesn't just go on Google and type in poem about maths, find a poem, copy and paste it and hand the work back in. And we know that students do that. And so Plagiarism Checker will check the students' work against the internet and will flag to me as a teacher if they have copied and pasted. So that's what Plagiarism Checker does. So those are all my choices. And again, as I said, all of this stuff is optional, so you don't have to spend this long going through all the choices. You pick the things that were relevant to you in your class, and then when you finish it, you press assign. If you press assign, it goes to the class. But you have a couple of other options. To the right of assign, the little arrow. Schedule means it goes at a later point in time, because maybe I'm planning this lesson. Maybe my students are going to do this tomorrow when they're not at school. And so actually, I don't want them to start work on it until tomorrow morning, so I could schedule it to go tomorrow. Or maybe I haven't quite finished it yet. I want to come back and think about it a bit more and change it, so I could save it as draft. So I have some choices there, but for now, we'll presume that this is all good, and I press assign. When I press assign, Google Classroom is going to tell my students that they've got a new piece of work. So there it is in the Classwork area. It's actually also on the stream. So when they come into the stream now, there it is at the top saying they've got a new assignment about the poem. And because if they're in my classroom, it's going to send them an email to tell them there's a new assignment. And for students who have mobile phones, if they have the mobile phone app, so there's a mobile phone app for Google Classroom, then it's going to ping on their mobile phone and say, you've got a new assignment. It's write a poem about maths. And lots of students come into Google Classroom via a mobile phone. So they use the mobile phone app to see the work. And again, they'd be able to click on it, see they've got a poem to write in this case, and go through and look at that work. So that's just using Classwork, using create an assignment. We have some other things in the create assignment. So we can also create quizzes. We can ask questions. We can share materials. And I'd say the other most important button that we see people using a lot in Google Classroom is reuse post. And reuse post says, well, I might have already written this out. Maybe I've already set a class, write a poem, or I've already set a class a piece of work. So by going to reuse post, I see all of my old Google Classrooms, all the classrooms I've ever been on as a teacher, and I can just get the post I've set maybe last year or to another class, and I can reuse in this class. So the idea of this is to save time. I mean, once you've written something out once I've created that assignment once, I can reuse it back into my Google Classrooms. So that's the Classwork area in Google Classrooms. We talked about the stream area. We talked about the Classwork area. Up next is people at the top. So the people area is where we add people to our classroom. So although I've been going through this talking about assigning, at the moment there's no one in my classroom but me. I need to bring some people in. So I can bring in more teachers. If there's 2 teachers teaching this subject, teaching maths, I can bring in another teacher here by popping their email address in, typing their name in. Or for students, I can do the same. I can press the plus button, and I have some other choices with students. So students can join by me typing their email again, or for students, I can send them this link, an invite link. This link, I can copy the link, and then I can paste that or send it to them or message it to them or whatever you use to communicate with your students, send it out to them. And when they click the link, they will automatically join the classroom. So that's a really good way if students are already remote, maybe they're already at home, they're not coming to school, you need to send something out to them to say, we're going to use this, send them that link, they click the link, Google Classroom opens, and they're in your class. And then what I usually do when I'm working with students is I do the link first, and then anyone who doesn't get in through link, I'll type their email address in here and add them that way. So that's getting students and teachers into my classroom. And then on the end, we've got grades, and this is the grade book. And so as we talked about, I'm going to just change my classroom here to want me some grades in. In the grade book, we can see all the grades that students have got for assignments. So we talked about earlier, we're setting an assignment and putting some grades in. If you want to, you can then store those grades in Google Classroom. So we can see here what different people in this class have done. Emma, who did our opening presentation earlier, has done this first assignment and scored 100. She's done the second one and scored 88. She's missing and hasn't handed in the third one. So as a teacher, just like I used to have a traditional mark book in my classroom on paper, I can keep my grades in Google Classroom if I want to. And those are what the 4 key areas are of Google Classroom. So we have the stream page, we have the Classwork page, we have the people page, and we have the grades page. And that is my quick overview of Google Classroom. A couple of other things I should mention. Number 1, at the top of the page here, and this is a relatively new thing in Google Classroom, we can see a Google Meet link. And so as schools closed and people started moving to more remote learning, people wanted to do more than just set an assignment on there. So each Google Classroom has a Google Meet link if you want to use Google Meet. So if I wanted to do some live synchronous learning with my students, I can turn that link on or off in settings. So I can go to settings and I can turn on and off here the Google Meet link. So if I don't want to use that with my class, just turn it off, press save, and the Google Meet link disappears. Well, in a minute. Obviously, it's got the closed eye now, which means it's not viewable for my students on there. One thing I would mention is if you are using other platforms, so maybe you use Zoom or maybe you use something else, you can also get those links to appear at the top here, because if you remember earlier when we were creating our classroom, in settings here, we've got all these other spaces we can put things in. So if I want to, I could put zoom.us and whatever my link is to my Zoom meeting, / whatever it is, I could put other links in there and press save. And what that means now is that link will also appear at the top here of my classroom if I'm using a different platform. So if you happen to be using some other tool for videos and it's working really well for you, you can still make that link appear at the top of Classroom in that way. And again, just so that students can easily get to it, they can find it, they know where to come to for either Meet or Zoom or whatever it is you're going to use when you're working with students. So that is using video calls inside Classroom. Just take that out so I don't confuse my students. Before we move on to look at some of the other Google tools, has anyone got any questions about Google Classroom? If you have, now's a great time to ask, either by unmuting and just asking, so you can just press unmute and ask, or in the chat on the right-hand side, you want to just type in a question and ask any questions, feel free to put those questions in the chat. I'll give it a second or two for questions. And what we're going to talk about next is Google Docs. So I'm going to go over to Google Docs next. Is it free to use? Good question. Thank you, Maria. So Google make all the G Suite for Education tools free to use. I mean, what about their different accounts? Okay. So is it free to use? Yes, it is. All of the tools, all of those things we looked at in the slide at the start are all free to use. And schools can sign up for Google for Education at the Google for Education homepage, which I always have to get to by just going to Google for Education on YouTube. And they can come here. If a school wants to use all the tools with their students, and they can come to Products and G Suite for Education. And on that page, it says they get started for free. So you press that button. And at this point, it takes you through a series of questions that asks you about your school to sign up and get started. But all of the Google tools are available free. Do you need an education account or just Gmail? You can use it with either account. So Classroom, as we saw there, exists with both accounts. But there are some advantages of using Google by signing up as a school with the education account. And so the two big advantages, I would say, well, there's lots of advantages, but the two big ones for teachers are: one, if you're on an education account, there's no advertising and no marketing across any of Google. So we don't see any adverts in the search. We don't see any adverts in any of the products or in Gmail or anything else. So it's advert free, as it should be when we're working with young people. And secondly, if we're using an education account, it means we open up all the additional features. So, for example, in Google Drive, we have unlimited file storage in Google Drive if you're an education account. So if you register for an education account, you can put as many files and folders as you want. Feel free to have a go at as many files and folders, but you can put as many files and folders as you want in the Drive. Whereas on the Gmail accounts, the free account, the public-facing accounts, there's limits on some of those things. So I would say, if you are using it as a school, it's better to go in the education route. Thank you for those questions. If anyone's got any other questions as we go, feel free just to drop them in the chat and ask. But we're going to move on, and we're going to have a look at Google Docs. I'm particularly about how we use Google Docs when we're working with students, as opposed to just the general document tools. So here we are in Google Docs, and Google Docs, as we said, we could have shared this with our class, so our students will be coming into Google Docs to do their work. And as you can see, it's a word processor and lots of very standard at the top here, sort of word processor icons and things. I'm not going to spend any time today, going through that's bold and that's italic, because I would imagine we've all used word processors in the past. So I'm going to focus on some of the key tools that we might use when we're working with students. Google Docs has got a number of tools built into it. And the first one I'm just going to talk about, which is popular with students, is voice typing. So voice typing allows me to talk to my computer and it will type up what I'm saying. So when I click to speak, it types in the words I'm saying. So I can use voice typing rather than manually type in what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to just type in today because the machine that I'm presenting on has got my mics coming through the meet, so it's not picking up my voice. But I'm going to just put cats are small creatures. As you can see, as I'm typing, it's auto-filling some of this in. That go meow. Okay, so I've written a small bit of text here on my document, just to give us an example of some work. Within Google, within all of the Google products, within Docs, Sheets, and Slides, we have another tool called Google Explore. And what Google Explore is doing is it's trying to help you with the work that you're doing at that point in time. So if I go over on the right-hand side here and I press Explore, what it does is it looks at my document and it says you can see any suggestions. It's not seen much yet. So I can then go to the top and I can put cats in. What this allows me to do is, in this case, in Docs, it allows me to use the power of the Google search engine to bring information into my document. So over on the right-hand side there, it's got the web. So if I wanted to get some more information about cats, maybe I'm doing some schoolwork about cats as a student, I can view the web over here on the right-hand side. Maybe I'm going to use some information on Wikipedia. Maybe I'm going to use something about the Cats film. It's found that as well from my search. So I could be writing things into my work. Also, when we're using Explore, we have this little button over here which says Cite as Footnote. And so the idea being is that when we've got students and they're using the Explore tool, we want them to be referencing where they're going out on the internet to get their work. And so let's imagine I use this Wikipedia page for information. If I press the button here, Cite as Footnote, it puts a really tiny, small little number 1 at the top there. At the bottom of my page, it cites the website I've used. And so as we're going, if we're using the Explore tool, students can be referencing, or you could be if you're using the Docs as well, you can be referencing where that work is coming from if we're getting the work and we're citing our footnotes over here. Because lots of students, certainly when I was going through college and university, that referencing piece was a struggle to have to remember where everything came from. We can also do images. So if we want to get images, we're going to now work on cats here. We want to get an image in. We want to put a picture in. Let's find a nice picture of a cat, that one there. Press the plus button, and then that will inject that image into my document as well. The image search on the right-hand side here that it's doing is not the same as just an open Google image search. So in Explore, what it's finding images which we've got the correct permission to put inside a Google Doc. So these images are labeled for reuse, and so it's a filtered search that it's finding. So because it knows I'm going to put them into a document, and that's what I'm doing. I'm writing a doc. So it's fine in terms of copyright to use any images in that search in our docs on the left-hand side. So I've now got my document. It's starting to take shape. I've been using the Explore tool. I might also want to look at something we call version history. So in Google Docs, whenever someone's working on a doc, we have something called version history. And version history helps us work out who's done what and when on that document. And as a teacher, I love version history. It's one of my favorite tools for me, finding out how long my students have spent doing their work and who did the work as well, because sometimes they may not have done the work themselves. To get to version history, I can go to this line at the top, which is the way it says it was last saved, or I can go File, Version History. Either way works. Both do the same thing. They bring up this page, and this is the version history of my document. So we can see here the only person that's been on this document is me. It was started, I'm in the UK, so it started at 9:42 this morning, and there's only been these are the edits. We can sort of go back, a little bit earlier. It looked like that before the image went in. We can just sort of go back in time, and then that piece got added at 9:56, and at 9:42 it was blank. So what we're seeing here is sort of how that document was created over time. So sort of the journey that the student has gone through to create that piece of work. And if they've maybe shared the document with their friend and their friend has written some of it, or maybe you've asked the students to do group work, we'd see the different users on here and we'd see who was in that document and who was working on it. So it's really useful when I get a student come to me and say, I've spent 10 hours writing this piece of work and it's only one line and a picture of a cat. I can go on there and say, actually, you spent sort of what looks like 4 minutes on that piece of work. You didn't spend 10 hours on it. So we can get that history and see what's going on. Also in version history, if maybe you've changed the document and you don't like it, maybe I don't want the picture of the cat, change my mind, I can go back to some point in time in the past and I can press restore this version at the top there. And it says, are you sure you want to restore it back to that version? And I do. And now my document has gone back to what it looked like a bit earlier in time. It's gone back to a previous version of my document. So all really useful tools when we're using Google Docs with students. One last thing I'll just mention in Docs is we've got the Google Docs interface here, but we also have something called add-ons. And add-ons allow us to bring additional functionality into Google products. And in this case, I'm in Docs, and I go to add-ons, and I go to get add-ons. And sometimes as teachers, particularly if you're teaching certain subjects, you might find add-ons really useful. So there's some great examples on the screen here. For example, flat music notation. If I was a music teacher and I was very focused around, delivering music to my students, then I would probably want to turn on music notation in my Docs, or easy accents if I'm teaching certain languages and I need umlauts, or I need certain styles of writing in my doc. I might want to turn that on for my students or for me to use as well. So add-ons are additional pieces of functionality. And again, certainly if you've got subject needs, if you've got, I need to use this tool, then you can focus on that within Google Docs. And so about halfway through now, that's Google Docs as we go through looking at some of the Google tools. Any Google Docs questions? If you've got any questions, feel free again to pop Google Docs questions in the chat. And whilst you're thinking of Docs questions, I'm going to move over.
Here's a result from YouTube.
Sorry, while my Google went off, I'm going to move over and talk about Jamboard. So any Google Docs questions, pop them in the chat. And if not, I'm going to talk about Jamboard. So Jamboard is one of the less used tools within G Suite, but it's really, really great for when you're working with students, because Jamboard is a big white space that we can use when we're working with students. So I've just gone on the internet to jamboard.google.com, and this shows on this page some of the Jamboards I've created in the past. But for now, I'm going to just start a new Jamboard. Because Google Docs is very sort of, formulaic, isn't it? It's really for be typed work, and students or you're going to sit there and type the work in, and it's going to be in a very sort of logical formatted order. But Jamboard is a much bigger space, and Jamboard allows us to create a different flow to the information that we might be collecting from students. So I'm on Jamboard. I'm going to go bottom right hand side to new, and I'm going to create a new blank Jamboard. So here's my new blank Jamboard. We'll give it a name, and I'm going to, as I teach it, I'm going to do one about geography today. And then we've got this big blank space. Think of it like a blank piece of paper for us to put content onto. And again, you could be doing this, or your students could. So Jamboard is a far more intuitive sort of space. So I can type on it if I want to. If I want to, I can put a text box on there. Oops. Put a text box on there. I can type things on there. That's perfectly fine. If you want to use it with just a keyboard and I'll move my little text around, that's fine. It can also work with any sort of touch device. So if your students are using mobile phones, which obviously have screens they can touch, they might want to use the pen. And again, with the pen tool, we can then start to draw on this and label things and draw little diagrams and whatever we might be doing with the pen tool. So the Jamboard allows us that flexibility to use the touch interface a little bit more. And what we find really popular is these tools here. So we can bring sticky notes in. So I might bring some sticky notes in. Erosion. I'm going to put some geographical terms on here. Let's put another one in. Position and transport. Put three geographical words in. So what I'm doing is I'm placing little sticky notes on my Jamboard, and I can then move. Let me just move these around. And as you can see, they can just be placed around the screen. The sticky notes are really nice for use for teachers, because we can start to create activities, sort of sorting activities, or pulling together thoughts and ideas and starting to categorize those. If you're a science teacher and you're interested in the categories of animals, we can start to do that with Jamboard. And bear in mind that this Jamboard file, we can use it in two ways. One, we could ask students to use it, but two, we could create a template. So I could create my template here with these 3 words on, and then I could go into Google Classroom and I could ask it to make a copy for each student, and then I could ask my students to come on and maybe, you know, put the definitions of these words in, or maybe come on and find images that are appropriate to the words to start to create their work. So Jamboard's really nice when we use it with Google Classroom, because we can use it to create these more interactive experiences for students. On the left-hand side here, maybe I'm going to bring an image in as well. So maybe I want to do an image search. I'm going to find a river bank image, and we'll just bring that in there. Pop that over there when it loads in. So again, we can start to bring this content in and sort of layer it and move it around. And so Jamboard is that more flowy space. And I don't know what age of students you're working with. We find it more popular with younger students as well for that reason. It's a little bit more adaptable to different teaching environments, and often sort of activities in the classroom where you might have said, well, let's get some paper out and let's do a poster or design something. That's where you might use Jamboard in that space. And that's what Jamboard looks like. If I then wanted to share that with my class, I can obviously go to the share button up here to do my share and get the link. Or, of course, if I'm in Google Classroom, I can just now go to my classwork, go to create, go to maybe it's an assignment, and then go to add, Google Drive. And because it's in my Google Drive, it'll be the most recent thing I was just on, because I was just on that. There is geography. I can insert it in my classroom and change it maybe to make a copy. And now all my students are going to get a copy of that board that I just built for the activity that I'm going to create. So Jamboard is a really nice tool when we talk about that integration, when we bring it across into Classroom. Works really nicely. And that's Google Jamboard. So we looked at Classroom so far. We looked a bit at Docs, and we looked at Jamboard. What I want to look at next is another of my favorites. I'd say the other of the big tools that gets used a lot, which is Google Slides. So I'm going to do something different this time. In my address bar at the top of the page, I'm going to type in slides.new as the web address in the Omnibox, the web address bar at the top. What that will do is it will just build me a nice blank set of Google Slides. So again, I'm online, I'm working just in the Chrome browser, and I've got my blank set of Google Slides here that I can use with my students, or in this case, maybe I'm going to use them as a teacher. So Google Slides is a bit like PowerPoint for people in the Windows world, and allows me to create presentations. But also, a Google slide can be any size. A bit like Jamboard, I can create much bigger slides. I can use it to create publishing if I want to. I can put in different paper sizes by going to File, Page Setup. And if I wanted to, I could go to Custom. And I could make my my slide any size I want. So if someone says, can you make a leaflet? Or could you do a poster? Or could you do this big A1 piece of paper thing? We could put in the size of the paper there. And we can start to put that content on. Google Slides has Explore, and we saw Explore earlier when we were using Google Docs. In Slides, it's really useful because what it can do is it can help us with our layouts of slides. So let's stick with my theme of cats again, or maybe I'll do a different animal, or maybe I'll change to dogs because we did cats earlier. So it'd be only fair if I do dogs. So I've just put dogs on there. I'm now going to go to Insert Image, and we'll go Search the Web. We'll go and find some pictures of dogs. So that's a picture of a dog. That's a nice looking dog. We'll put that in. And then we'll go again. We'll go Insert Image, Search the Web. We'll find another dog picture. Let's go, that one. That's quite nice. Insert that in. And so these pictures are just sitting on my slide at the moment. There they are. They're not in any particular place. It's got the word dogs on there as well. What the Explore tool does is it helps us with the layout of the slide. So if I press Explore, always have to hope this works at this point. What it's coming up with, it's coming up with different designs for my slide based on the content that's already on there. Because lots of teachers, and I used to do this a lot, I would want to create some slides to present to my students. So I would go in there and I'd find pictures, and then I would spend ages moving them around and cropping them and making them look nice. But actually the Explore tool can do that for you. So to get to the Explore tool, it's just in the bottom right hand side, or Tools, Explore, and it brings up this side menu. What it's using artificial intelligence to look at my slides and suggest different ways in which they could look better. So it's saying, well, maybe that would be better for your dog poster, or maybe, sorry, your dog slide, or maybe that's better, Or maybe if you want to go black and white, that's better, although it's cut off the head there a bit. Or maybe this picture, or maybe this one. And so it's suggesting layouts for my slides. And for me, that saves me as a teacher a lot of time, because pop my content on, press explore, pick the one I like the most. I'll go with that one today. And then come over on the right side here, and we're on to the next slide. And so it's just a time-saving feature, and that's why I find it really useful. So another thing that slides is really nice for is when we start to bring other content into slides. So because slides is a presentation tool, that means we can bring video content in as well. So we can go insert video, and it gives me the choice to find things in Google Drive or a URL, or just to search YouTube. So in this case, I'm going to go and search YouTube for a video on dogs, funny animal videos. Now, obviously, as a teacher, I would always watch content. So if I was ever going to use this with students, I would watch this content through first. I would make sure this is appropriate for my class and my students. But if I just pop this video in here now, I've got my video there for my students to watch that I want them to watch. So I've got a title slide and this video. One of the nice things about embedding YouTube videos inside Google Slides is that my students end up with just that video. So when my students are looking at the content, they just see this video, they look at this content, and then they come to this slide and they look at this content, which is the video, and they press play and watch the video. But what they're not seeing as a student is all the other stuff that we see in YouTube. So effectively, we're cutting out distraction from around that video, because one of the things about going to YouTube is we obviously have a lot of other content down the right hand side. There's a chat box at the bottom. There's comments people might have left on the video. There's all sorts of other content around that. But by bringing the video from YouTube and embedding it into slides here, we've just got the video. It's just a clean video on its own. There's nothing else there. They're going to watch that video and then go on to maybe the next slide for something else. Maybe I've set some questions on the next slide for them to answer about the video. And so that's why sometimes I will put videos in a slide, even if all I'm setting my class is to watch a video, for that purpose, that it helps me sort of give them that clean experience from the video. And so that's just using Google Slides, just a couple of Google Slide things there. And then maybe at that point, I decide, well, actually, I want some help with these slides. Maybe I want to share these slides with other people. So I go to share. And as you see, before I can share something in Google, it has to have a name. It can't be shared with just untitled. So it's called dogs, which is fine. So we press save. And then this brings me the share menu up. So we see share as a key button across all of Google. We saw it in Docs. We saw it's here in Slides. It's in Sheets. It's in our tools. And this allows us to share with individuals. So I could just put someone in here. So like my colleague Jess, maybe I want to share with Jess. I could put a name in there. And when I share something, I've got three big choices. So my three big choices are viewer, and that means that someone can just look at it. So if I want my students to look at the dogs, watch the video, give them view. Next one down, commenter, means they can look at it, leave comments, but they can't edit it. So they can't change my slides, move my images, but they can leave a comment on the right-hand side to say maybe some suggestions for improvement. And if you're going to do peer assessing, have one student looking at another student's work and leaving comments for improvement, you'd use the commenter option. And the bottom of this is editor. An editor means that Jess can edit my work. So she could come on here, she could change it, she could change the presentation to cats if she wanted, she could just alter the whole thing. And so 3 different levels there, those 3 options. And then if I want to send her a message, I can. And that's the share. Now on the share page at the top is a little box. We've got some more advanced options, some variations on share. So if I wanted to share it with Jess, but I was worried she's going to add other people, maybe she starts adding other people to my document, I can remove her ability to do that. So she can't add people anymore. And in this one, commenters and viewers can see the option download, print and copy. Maybe I don't want people copying my work. Maybe I don't want someone downloading this or printing it out. So I can take that permission off as well if I want to make something more secure. And that's within settings options there. Also on the share page, the other option for sharing is to get a link. So I can get a link here. It says get link, so I can copy the link. Here's my link. And I can then share that with a variety of people. So restricted means the people who I've given permission to. Canopy is where I work, so it's everybody I work with. And anyone with a link is the whole wide world. So if I want to share this presentation maybe with parents and with students who might not even have accounts, I could just change it to anyone with a link can view. That seems good. Copy that link and send that link out in whatever way you use to communicate. So either in Google Classroom, or if you've got WhatsApp, or you're using Teams, or whatever else you might be using, you can copy that link out that way. So that's slides, but it's also a little bit of conversation around how we share work when we're one of the Google products. So Google Slides there. The last tool I'm going to talk about is Google Forms. Advice as we go through the Google tools and looking at them for learning. If anyone's got any questions about slides or docs, feel free to pop them in the chat. But otherwise, I'm going to move over to Google Forms. And this time around, I'm going to go into Google Drive. I'm going to start my my Forms piece from Google Drive. So I'm here in Google Drive. I'm going to New and Google Forms. And Google Forms is a great tool for two things, for collecting information. But for us in teaching, it's really useful as a quiz tool, because Google Forms can build quizzes and can be used to create that self-marking quizzes that might be useful for us as teachers. So that's what I'm going to think about today. So here's my form. It's got no title at the moment, but I'm going to call it History Quiz. And then I'm going to ask some questions. So I'm going to ask a question here for my students to answer. We'll have, I'm trying to think of a history question at the moment. We can have I should have got a question in advance here for a history question, shouldn't I? Who was the king of England in 1066? So let's imagine I'm teaching my students about the history of England, and I'm asking them who the King of England was in 1066. And then what I'm going to do underneath is give them some choices for this quiz. So we'll have William the Conqueror. We'll have Queen Elizabeth. And we could obviously put some other choices in there as well. King Arthur, etc. So I'm just putting in some choices for my students to select at this point. So I'm building up a very simple little quiz by putting the questions in and starting to build my quiz in Google Forms. At this point, my form isn't actually a quiz yet. At this point, my form is just a form. They send it out, fill it in, and you can see who's answered what, but it's not going to mark itself. To make a Google form a quiz, we have to specify it as a quiz. So we have to go into settings, and we have to go over to the quizzes option, and we have to say, make this a quiz. So whenever we want a Google form to be a quiz, if it's not, it's just going to gather information if it's a form. We have to slide the slider over to make this a quiz. And then there's some other options. So when can they see their grades? We're going to be nice, let them see the grades straight away, and pop down there the options, and we'll press save. So we now have our quiz. It's going to mark itself. We need to come over to the answer key, and we need to set the correct answer, which is William the Conqueror. So that's the correct answer for that question. And we're going to give them a certain number of points. We'll give them, we'll be very generous. We'll give them 50 points when they get that question answered. So we've now got our quiz set up as a quiz to send out to our students. It's only got one question, but obviously I could write multiple questions in the same way. I might want to give my students some feedback when they answer that question. So maybe if they get it incorrectly, I need to say, you need to watch this video. So when my students do the quiz, if they don't know who the King of England is in 1066, maybe I'm going to put in a YouTube video about the Battle of Hastings. That will do. So I'm going to say to them, if they don't know the answer to that question, here's a video that I want them to watch. So what I'm doing here as a teacher is I'm not only asking them a question, but I'm then giving them some additional activities to do, some learning to do based off the score they got. But if they got it correct, they obviously don't need to watch the video. I'm going to just say, well done. So I've now got answer feedback on that question. So they're not only doing the question and I'll get the score back and I'll know who got 50 and who got 0, but I'm also going to actually give them something to do as a result of their score. So we're starting to build this sort of learning journey for students in Google Forms. The last thing I want to do is obviously send that to my students. I just want to check the settings and turn it off. When I want to send a form out, obviously what I might do is put that in Google Classroom, Because if I put that in Google Classroom, that score, that 50, would go in that grade book in Classroom, so it would link together nicely. But we'll do a test of this. We'll get the link. I'll just grab the link here for the form. I'm going to put the link into the chat. So you, in this call, should be able to click on that link, just appear in the chat over there, and answer the question. And given that I just talked about the correct answer, it shouldn't be the hardest quiz in the world. And as you go through and answer that question, we'll then see what happens when a Google form gets a response. So you should be able to click that link in the chat over there on the right-hand side. It'll load the quiz up. You can pick one of those answers that you think is correct, and you can get it right or wrong. I really don't mind. And you can respond. And what we can see now on my screen here, we can see it's got 2 responses so far, is people are clicking on that, people are answering that question. As a teacher, I can now go in. I can see that unsurprisingly so far, everybody's got it right. Whoever's answered it so far has clicked the correct answer. So I can see the distribution of the points and sort of how the different answers, the different questions in my quiz are scoring. Because as a teacher, if I've got a question that I've set my students and no one's got it right, then maybe I need to go back over a concept. Maybe I need to reteach a concept again. And so forms can be useful to guide what we're doing if we do delivering teaching that way. And so that's completing the form there in Google Forms. Of course, what I could do is assign that form over in Classroom. So finally, I could go to Classroom. I could come back over to Classroom, which we saw earlier. I go create. This time around, it's a quiz assignment because I'm doing a quiz. And then I don't want to use the blank quiz that's created. I'm going to add one in Google Drive again. I'm going to pick up the form that I just built over in Google Forms and insert that in. And now my students can then answer that quiz. I've actually inserted the blank one there, haven't I? I'll go again. Add. Have I not called it? I'll tell you what, I haven't called it anything. Look, I've left it on there. It's called History Quiz now. Okay, now I can add it properly. History Quiz, which is that one. Insert. And now my form is in Google Classroom. And the nice thing about my form in Google Classroom is we have this grade importing feature. So as my students answer it, the grades are going to go straight to Gradebook for that form. So it's going to bring that data all the way back through. And that is a very brief overview of Google Forms. So what I've been trying to do in the session today is really sort of give you a brief look at some of the Google tools. But obviously, often that will leave you going off and wanting to learn more about the different tools. And so we have a particular area in Google, and I'll put a link in the chat in just a second, which is called the Teacher Center. If I'll get the right one, which is this one. And so the Google for Education Teacher Center is where you can find out a lot more about using the Google tools for teaching and learning. So I've really sort of just skimmed through today just some of that, sort of an overview of what they do. There's obviously a lot more detail in what we can do with the different tools, and you can find out about that in the Teacher Center. And you can learn in that space in different ways. The first one is by product. So maybe you want to know about Google Classroom or Google Forms or Google Docs. You can go into the individual products in that space and look about how they work with students. Alternatively, we've got some training courses online as well. And so we have 2 big training courses, which is Learn the Basics, which is the lower level, and then the Going Further, which is the more advanced level. And these are online training courses that are free to take part in, that you can just start training and work your way through. And then down below that, we've got some focused courses. So there's one called One Focus on Distance Learning. So how do we use the Google tools specifically when students are at the classroom? And then the newest course now, so I just launched, is about creative distance learning. So how do we engage students doing more than just maybe a basic doc, but how do we move further and do that? And that's down there as well. And then there's one called about Chromebooks. So a range of courses there that you can get started with. The other thing that's on this page, and I'll pop a link to this in the chat as well, is there is the option to do the email course, and that's also a weekly for people brand new to Google. So if your school is just like turned on Google, or you're just going to use it for the very first time, I'll pop a link in the chat to this one as well. This is a weekly email, it comes over 8 weeks with little videos about using the different tools. And so these are great ways of, in terms of, you know, what to do next. If you are interested and you want to learn more, the Teacher Center is a great place to start that learning. And also the Getting Started course, and I'll put the link in the chat for that one as well, is a great place to get information from. So that sort of brings us to the end of today's session. If anyone's got any questions, feel free. I'll be around for a minute or two more to put them in the chat. But otherwise, thank you for joining us. And I will pop a link in because we've got some other sessions coming up shortly. So I'm going to just get the links for the next sessions. So coming up at 12:45, there's a 15-minute gap. And then coming up at 12:45, I'll get the links to these. If you give me a second, I'll put the links in the chat should you need the links to the next sessions. And now's also a great time if you've got any questions to pop those in the chat while I find the links. So in the next slot, there are 3 possible sessions, and those links are now in the chat, but they won't obviously start for another 15 minutes. Otherwise, I was going to say thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you found some of that content useful. Good luck with your journeys and take care, everybody.